there wasn't simply a response, vis-a-vis that Kelly Ayotte piece you just mentioned, that, hey, one of our guys has been in captivity for 5 years. No matter what turns out to be the case, 5 years in captivity for an American is a long time, and shouldn't we celebrate the fact that he has been released? And I think that's the biggest surprise to everybody, despite the reports on what he may or may not have done.
Yeah, if there was some favor dispensed, it was short-lived. Michael, from a counterterrorism perspective, we have talked a lot about Bergdahl. We have not talked a lot about the Taliban, the released Taliban officials who are now in Qatar. John Boehner has cast doubt on whether they are truly going to be monitored. There is some, Senator McCain has talked about whether or not they will truly be able to be, they'll be able to travel freely, and how much of a threat they pose to our to American society, and how much of a counterterrorism or a terrorism threat they pose. From your vantage point, how worried should we be? How worried should the global community be?
I think the global community in the U.S. should be worried. I mean, there are people in Guantanamo who were basic foot soldiers. That's not the category these guys were in. These were really key Taliban leaders who played a huge role in their defense ministry, who worked with al-Qaeda on some intelligence issues. These are senior folks who could play a big role. I'll even give the Qataris the benefit of the doubt for the next year. I think they're likely to control them to a great degree, but it's only a one-year agreement, and maybe the reasoning is most of our troops will be out 1 year from now. But I will be really, really surprised if 1 year plus these five are not deeply involved with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and frankly will make it more difficult for the government we currently support in Afghanistan to have control over the region.
Well, and of course, yes, so to that point, I mean, and the Washington Post editorial board makes this point more eloquently, but they basically said the president has made clear to the Afghans that he's effectively giving up on them by allowing these high-level Taliban officials to effectively come back to that part of the world and operate in some capacity.
That's right. And again, it's not about these guys becoming suicide bombers. I mean, that's
right.
The sort of recidivism problem that we've had with most of our Guantanamo people who have been released. These guys are certainly going to be looked up to by the rest of the Taliban leadership. Mullah Omar's reaction was pretty telling. These are meaningful leaders, and I think we are fundamentally giving this to the government of Afghanistan, saying, we're very sorry, we're leaving, you're going to have to face lots of problems, and one of the other things you're going to have to face is what these five mean to the Taliban.
EJ, there's a lot to unpack in this story, but another angle on it is the signing statements and executive privilege, and the fact that the president in 2007 said, I will not use signing statements to nullify or undermine congressional instructions as enacted into law. President Obama, in all fairness, has signed far fewer than George Bush, who signed 1,200 signing statements, amendments to laws, basically. President Obama has signed only 30. But at the same time, it once again brings us to this conversation about the difference between candidate Obama and President Obama, and the old notion that you are where you stand, where you sit, that experience is everything, that vantage point is everything. How much of an issue do you think this is for his legacy as president?
Well, look, it's so easy to play footage of very strong statements by then Senator Obama on what he saw as President Bush's abuse of signing statements. They've been out there already. And so that's a problem. I think that the issue here is when you are president and you see an opportunity to get a POW released, the only POW left from these wars, you are inclined to grab that opportunity. And as we said earlier, I think to make the assumption that people will be so glad to get the POW out that Congress will understand. But still, again, as we've already talked about, there's always controversy over releasing people from Guantanamo. I think two things here. One is, I think Tony Blinken did say something very important, which is let's at least give Sergeant Bergdahl a chance to tell his side of the story. And in particular, did he have all his faculties about him, if indeed, as seems the case, that he abandoned his post. The second thing is, you wonder if this negotiation, or whatever the administration wants to call it, was part of an effort to open broader discussions with the Taliban, to see if there can be some longer-term settlement of the conflict, and that we will find out soon enough.
Michael, let me ask you on that note, to EJ's point, I think a lot of folks keep trying to read a bigger project to be at the root of this, not just about winding down a war and getting a POW out of a country, not just about sort of a transfer and a prisoner swap, but that this is somehow a bellwether, a precursor to broader action, broader negotiations with the Taliban, or a broader movement to close Guantanamo Bay. Do you see it as such at this point?
Well, I see it as a broader effort on the president's part to close Guantanamo, a very forceful statement of we are going to get these people out of here. I don't see it as a broader statement on trying to open up deeper negotiations with the Taliban. In fact, that's the piece, that demand is what largely, not entirely, but largely scuttled previous discussions to get Bergdahl back in 2011, 2012. So I think it's just the opposite, actually. It's trying to get this individual back, giving that up, and not looking for anything deeper, because we are withdrawing from Afghanistan in a significant way. And I have great sympathy for the president as commander-in-chief doing all he can to get him back, not looking at the circumstances. I think there's plenty of time to investigate that. But on the front of what was exchanged, we can't kid ourselves, and I think the president recognized this. These 5 individuals absolutely will pose a threat to Afghan stability in the future.
EJ, you know, one thing about the Republican critics who have been fierce and uncensored in their thoughts in the last couple days, if the president had left Bo Bergdahl in Afghanistan, one can imagine the same sort of counter-argument coming from the right. In other words, he was in some ways caught between a rock and a hard place. Get Bo Bergdahl out and, oh, this guy was not a prisoner of war, he was a traitor to his country. Leave Bo Bergdahl there and you've left a patriot in enemy hands.
Well, I think the assumption behind your question, which is that these days the Republicans will criticize President Obama for whatever he does, is entirely true. And that is why I think some of us were taken aback at the ferocity of the immediate reaction that they had. I think that what you're seeing on the question of consultation of Congress, did he follow the law, that seems to have a broader impact on both parties, where people are basically asking, senators of both parties are basically asking, was there some way they could have kept us in the loop, at least to some degree, about what they were up to? And I think that's why the president's chief of staff is on the Hill, is to try to work that out, because Dianne Feinstein being critical, Dianne Feinstein doesn't usually jump to criticize President Obama.
And this is certainly an issue where the White House would enjoy the support of Senator Dianne Feinstein. Michael Leiter and EJ Dionne, thank you both, gentlemen, for your time and thoughts.